The rain had been falling for 3 days without stopping, and the road that led down into the valley had turned to a river of brown mud. Marin pulled her wool cloak tighter around her shoulders and kept walking. Her boots were soaked through. Her fingers had gone numb inside her wet gloves. The basket on her arm held 2 loaves of bread, a small jar of honey, and a folded cloth full of dried herbs. She was bringing them to old Mrs. Pell, who lived alone in the last cottage before the mine road. She had made this walk once a week for the past 2 years, and she would make it again next week and the week after that because Mrs. Pell had no one else and Marin had promised. The wind cut across the open field and pushed the rain sideways into her face. She lowered her head and kept going. She was 23 years old. She was the daughter of the village schoolmaster who had died 4 winters ago and the granddaughter of a woman who had once been a lady's maid in a great house far away. She had no title. She had no fortune. She had a small stone cottage at the edge of the village, a garden that fed her most of the year, and a way of looking at people that made them tell her their troubles whether she asked or not. She was near the crossroads when she heard it. A low, deep sound, like the earth clearing its throat. She stopped. The sound came again, longer this time, and then a great rumble that she felt through the soles of her boots. She turned her head toward the hill where the mine entrance stood. A cloud of dust and smoke was rising above the trees. Marin dropped the basket. She did not think. She ran. The mud grabbed at her boots and the rain lashed her cheeks, and her hair came loose from its pins and stuck to her neck. She ran up the track toward the mine, and every step she took she prayed that no one had been inside. The mine had been closed for 2 years. The old Duke had shut it down after the last accident, and no one from the village worked it now. But sometimes boys went in on a dare. Sometimes travelers took shelter there when the weather turned. Sometimes people who did not know the valley used it as a shortcut through the hill. She came around the bend and saw the mouth of the mine. Or what had been the mouth. Half the hillside had come down. Timber beams stuck out of the mud like broken bones. Stones the size of a man's chest lay scattered across the ground. Dust still hung in the wet air, mixing with the rain to form a strange pale fog. And near the base of the fallen entrance, half buried under a slide of loose earth and wood, she saw a hand. Just a hand, pale, streaked with dirt, palm turned upward as if asking for something. The fingers moved. Marin scrambled down the slope. Her feet slid out from under her, and she landed hard on her hip, but she did not stop. She crawled the last few feet on her hands and knees. She reached the hand. She grabbed it. It was warm. "Alive. Can you hear me?" she said. Her voice came out sharp and thin. "Can you hear me? I am here. I am here now." A muffled sound came from under the earth, a groan, then a cough. She began to dig. She used her bare hands. She pulled away the smaller stones first, then scooped the wet earth away from what she guessed was his shoulder, then his chest. Her nails broke. Her palms bled. She did not notice. The rain kept falling, and the earth kept sliding back into the hole she was making, but she kept going. She talked while she worked. She did not know if he could hear her, but she talked. "I have you. I have you now. You are going to be all right. Just breathe. Just breathe for me." Slow, slow, she uncovered his other arm. Then his face. He was dark-haired, with a beard of 2 or 3 days, and there was blood on his forehead where a stone had cut him. His eyes opened, gray eyes, very clear, even under all the dirt. He looked at her. He did not speak. He only looked at her, as if he was trying to decide whether she was real. "Do not try to talk," she said. "I am going to get you out. Do you hurt anywhere?" "Your legs. Can you feel your legs?" He blinked. Then, slowly, he moved one foot. The heavy boot shifted under the pile of earth. He moved the other foot. He nodded, just once. "Good," she said. "That is very good. Now I need you to stay still while I clear this away." She worked for what felt like an hour. The rain never stopped. She was so cold that her hands had stopped shaking, because shaking took energy her body could not spare. She uncovered his chest, then his hips, then his legs. His coat was heavy dark wool, well made. The kind of coat a rich man would wear when he did not want to be recognized as rich. His boots were fine leather under the mud. There was a leather satchel across his chest, and something hard inside it pressed against her wrist when she leaned over him. When at last he was free of the earth, she sat back on her heels. She was breathing so hard she could hear it above the rain. "Can you sit up?" she asked. He tried. He got halfway up, and a bad sound came out of him, and he sank back down. She caught his shoulders before his head hit the stone behind him. "Slower," she said. "We will do it slower." She got an arm under his shoulders. She was not a large woman, but 2 years of hauling water from the well and turning her own garden had made her stronger than she looked. She braced her feet against a fallen beam and lifted. He helped as much as he could. Together they got him sitting. Then, with a long pause and one bitten-off sound of pain, they got him standing. He leaned on her. He was much taller than her. His weight nearly took her down. "There is a cottage," she said. "It is not far. Mrs. Pell's cottage. She has a fire. Can you walk?" "I can walk," he said. It was the first thing he had said. His voice was low and hoarse and had the shape of London in it, an educated voice, a voice not used to needing anyone. They walked. He put one arm across her shoulders, and she put her arm around his waist, and together they made a slow, uneven creature that slid down the muddy track step by step. Twice he stopped, and she thought he was going to fall. Twice he did not. His breath came fast and shallow against her ear. He smelled of rain and stone dust and something underneath that she could not name. Something warm and clean, like cedar wood after a long summer. Mrs. Pell's cottage sat in a hollow, half hidden by 2 old yew trees. Smoke rose from the chimney in a thin white line. Marin pushed the door open with her hip. "Mrs. Pell," she called out. "It is Marin. I have a man here who is hurt." Mrs. Pell was 90 if she was a day, and small as a bird, but she stood up from her chair by the fire without a wasted movement. She took one look at the man and pointed to the wooden bench by the hearth. "There," she said, "set him down there. Then take off that wet coat before you catch your death, girl." They got him onto the bench. He sat with his head bowed, his forearms on his knees, water and blood dripping from his hair onto the stone floor. Mrs. Pell brought a heavy quilt from the bed and put it over his shoulders. She brought a kettle to the fire. She brought a strip of clean linen in a small clay pot that smelled of honey and thyme. "Head first, Mrs." Pell said. "Girl, hold his hair back." Marin knelt beside the bench. She lifted his dark wet hair away from the cut. Up close, in the firelight, she could see that he was younger than she had first thought. Perhaps 30. His jaw was set hard against the pain, but he did not make a sound as Mrs. Pell cleaned the wound and pressed the salve into it. His eyes were closed. His lashes were very dark and long. He opened his eyes and looked at her. She was very close. The fire cracked in the hearth. A drop of water fell from the edge of her hair onto the back of his hand where it rested on his knee, and neither of them moved. "There," said Mrs. Pell, tying off the bandage. "Now we will see what else is broken." Nothing else was broken, as it turned out. 2 ribs were bruised, one badly. His left wrist had been twisted. There was a long scrape down his back where a beam had dragged across him as he fell. But he was whole. Mrs. Pell shook her head at him. "You are a lucky man, sir." "Yes," he said. He was looking at Marin. "I am." Marin felt her cheeks go hot. She stood up quickly and busied herself with the kettle. "You will stay the night here, Mrs. Pell said. "The road is a river. No one goes anywhere in this weather. Marin, you will stay too. I will not have you walking back in the dark." "I cannot," Marin began. "You can, and you will," said the old woman. "There is soup. There are 2 beds, and the bench for the gentleman. That is settled." They ate the soup in near silence. It was barley soup, with a little mutton in it, and it warmed Marin from the inside out. The man ate slowly, one hand pressed to his side where the ribs pained him. He said his name was Alistair. He said he had been passing through the valley and had gone into the mine to get out of the rain. He said he was very grateful. He did not say what he did. He did not say where he was from. He did not say why a man in a coat like that was walking alone in a valley in a storm. Marin did not ask. That night she lay on a straw pallet on the floor near the fire, wrapped in a borrowed blanket, and listened to him breathe on the bench across the room. His breathing was uneven at first, the breathing of a man with sore ribs trying to find a way to lie that did not hurt. Slowly it evened out. She listened until she was sure he was asleep. Then she lay awake for a long time, watching the low red light of the coals move on the ceiling, thinking about the moment she had seen his hand come up out of the earth. She fell asleep just before dawn. When she woke, he was already sitting up. Mrs. Pell was pressing a cup of hot tea into his hands. He was watching Marin across the room. She sat up quickly and pushed her hair back. "The rain has stopped," he said. "Good," she said. She did not know what else to say. She helped Mrs. Pell with the fire and the porridge. She kept her back to him. She could feel him looking at her. It was not the kind of look she had ever felt before. Men in the village looked at her sometimes, at market or after church, but their looks were quick and easy and forgettable. His look was slow. It was as if he was reading her. After breakfast, he asked her if she would walk with him back to the crossroads. He said he had left his horse tied there, in the shelter of a hedge, and he hoped the horse was still standing. Mrs. Pell nodded. Marin agreed. They walked. The valley was full of the smell of wet earth and crushed grass. Birds were coming out again. Water ran everywhere, in tiny bright streams beside the track. Alistair walked slowly, favoring his ribs, one hand pressed to his side. He did not speak for a long while, neither did she. At the crossroads, the horse was still there, a big dark bay, wet through, calm as a stone. He rubbed the horse's neck with his good hand. "Miss Marin," he said. He turned to her. "I owe you my life. You owe me nothing," she said. "I would have done the same for anyone." "I know," he said. "That is why I owe you." She did not understand what he meant, but she felt her cheeks go warm again. She looked down at her ruined boots. "You are hurt still," she said. "You should not ride far." "I will not ride far," he said. "I have friends in the district. I will send word to you when I am mended. May I do that?" She looked up. He was watching her very steadily. "Yes," she said. "You may do that." He mounted the horse with more care than pride, and he rode away toward the north road, and she stood at the crossroads until he was out of sight. Then she picked up her basket, which she had dropped the day before, and which someone had kindly leaned against a fence post, and she walked home. She did not know that he had lied. She did not know that his name was not Alistair, or not only. She did not know that he was the Duke of Ravensmoor, who had inherited his title 6 months ago from a cousin, and who had come to this valley looking for a young woman his cousin had spoken of on his deathbed. A young woman whose grandmother had once served the Ravensmoor family. A young woman to whom the old Duke, on his deathbed and burdened by a secret debt of honor, had left a great deal of money and a small piece of land and a letter he could not bring himself to write while he lived. A young woman named Marin. She did not know any of that. She only knew that a stranger with gray eyes had ridden away up the north road, and that her hands still hurt from digging him out of the earth, and that for some reason she could not stop thinking about the moment when he had opened his eyes and looked at her as if she were the answer to a question he had been asking for a very long time. 3 days passed, then 4, then a week. Maren went about her life. She taught the 4 village children who came to her cottage in the mornings to read from an old primer that had belonged to her father. She weeded her garden. She helped her neighbor Mrs. Vance turn her mattress, and she baked bread for the smith's wife who had just had her 3rd baby. She did not think about the stranger. She thought about him only at odd moments, when she was drawing water from the well and the sun caught the surface of the water in a certain way, when she was walking past the crossroads on her way to Mrs. Pell's, when the wind at night moved the shutters and she woke thinking she had heard a horse. She did not expect him to send word. She had told herself firmly not to expect it. Men in fine coats did not send word to women in stone cottages. That was not how the world worked. She had done a kindness. That was the end of it. On the 8th day, a rider came down the village lane. He was a servant, in a plain dark coat, with a small badge stitched on the collar that Maren did not recognize. He asked for Miss Maren Ashfield. Half the village came out to their doors to watch. He handed her a letter sealed with red wax. She took the letter inside her cottage before she opened it. Her hands were shaking. She sat down at her small kitchen table. She broke the seal. The letter was very short. Miss Ashfield, I am mending well and I have not forgotten my debt to you. I find I must ask a favor. There is a matter concerning your late grandmother and my family which I would speak to you about in person. If you would be willing to come to Ravensmoor Hall on Thursday next, my carriage will be sent for you at 10 o'clock. If you do not wish to come, I will understand, and I will bring the matter to you here instead. Either way, you shall not be forced to anything. Your servant, A. She read it twice. Ravensmoor Hall. She had heard of it, of course. Everyone in the county had heard of it. It was the great house at the far end of the valley, past the woods, with its long avenue of lime trees. She had never seen it. She had never known anyone who had gone inside it. Ravensmoor, the name meant nothing to her at first. Then, slowly, she remembered. Her grandmother, on her deathbed, had murmured about a house she had once served in. Ravens. She had said the word ravens. Maren had thought it was a fever dream. She sat at the table for a long time, holding the letter. Then she got up and she wrote her answer with the stub of pencil she kept for the children's lessons. She wrote that she would come on Thursday. She gave the note to the servant, who was waiting patiently by the gate, drinking a cup of small beer that Mrs. Vance had brought him. He bowed to her, put the note inside his coat, and rode away. The village talked of nothing else for 4 days. On Thursday morning, at 10 o'clock exactly, a carriage came down the village lane. It was not enormous, but it was well made, dark green with silver on the wheels, drawn by 2 black horses. The driver climbed down and opened the door for her. Maren was wearing her best dress, a plain gray wool that had been her mother's, and a small white collar she had washed the night before. She had done her hair in a simple knot. She carried nothing. She had nothing worth carrying. The carriage moved off. She looked out the window as the village fell behind her. She saw Mrs. Vance at her gate, waving. She saw the smith standing in his doorway, wiping his hands on his apron, watching her go. She waved back. The ride to Ravensmoor Hall took nearly an hour. The road wound through beechwoods where the light came down in slow green shafts. It crossed a stone bridge over a river she had never seen before. It climbed a long, low hill. And then at the top of the hill, the carriage turned off the main road and passed under a stone arch, and Maren saw the avenue of lime trees, and at the end of the avenue, the house. It was very large. She had known it would be large. She had not been prepared for how it seemed to grow out of the earth, warm gold stone in the morning sun, with tall windows and a wide door and chimneys like the towers of a small city. She sat with her hands folded very tightly in her lap. The carriage stopped at the front steps. The driver opened the door. She stepped down. Alistair was standing at the top of the steps. He was not dressed like a man who had ridden through a storm. He was in fine, dark clothes, well cut, and his cut on his forehead had faded to a thin pink line. He came down the steps to meet her. He walked more easily now. "Miss Ashfield," he said. "Thank you for coming." "Sir," she said. She did not curtsy. She did not know how to properly curtsy. She had never needed to. "Please," he said, "come inside." She followed him up the steps and through the great door. The hall was very tall and very quiet. Their footsteps echoed on the black and white stone floor. A servant in dark livery bowed as they passed. Another opened a set of double doors ahead of them. They came into a room lined with books. A fire burned in a marble fireplace. 2 chairs were drawn up near the fire. On a small table between them, a tea tray had been set out. A pot of tea, 2 cups, a plate of small cakes, a jug of milk. Everything was warm and orderly and quiet. He waited until she was seated. Then he sat down across from her. "I must first apologize to you," he said. "For what, sir?" "For letting you believe I was only Alistair," he said. "That is my given name, but my full name is Alistair Blackwood. I am the Duke of Ravensmoor." She did not speak. She could not for a moment. She looked at the fire. "I came to the valley in plain clothes because I did not want to be recognized," he said. "I was looking for someone. I had reason to believe she lived in this valley. I did not want to arrive with a great carriage and terrify her. I thought I would find her, look at her a little, learn what kind of person she was, and then present myself properly. That was my plan." The mind collapsed on my plan. He said it with the smallest smile. She did not smile back. She was still looking at the fire. "Who were you looking for?" she asked. "You," he said. She turned her head then and looked at him. "Me?" "Your grandmother," he said, "was a woman named Hetty Ashfield. She was in service in this house 45 years ago. She was maid to my great-aunt Beatrice, who never married. When Beatrice died, she left your grandmother a small sum of money and a promise that the family would look after her. That promise was broken, not by malice, by forgetfulness. My uncle, who was Duke then, was not a careful man. Your grandmother was allowed to leave this house with nothing but her wages. She married. She raised a daughter. Your mother married your father, and you were born. How do you know all this?" Marin asked. "My cousin," said the Duke, "who was Duke before me, was a careful man. On his deathbed he told me the story. He had been trying for years to find Hetty Ashfield or her descendants. He had located Hetty's daughter, your mother, too late. She had already died. He did not know if there was a granddaughter. He asked me, as my last duty to him, to find out, and if there was, to give her what should have been given to Hetty. He reached into a folder that lay on the little table and drew out a paper. He set it in front of her. This, he said, is the deed to a piece of land at the edge of the estate. 20 acres. A stone farmhouse. 2 fields. It belonged, once, to my great-aunt Beatrice. It was hers to give. She meant to give it to your grandmother. She did not manage it in time. I mean to give it to you now." Marin looked at the paper. She did not touch it. "There is also," he said, "a sum of money, set aside in trust. It is not a fortune. It is enough. You will have no fear of hunger, or of cold winters, or of a leaking roof for the rest of your life. I have made it so that it belongs to you alone. No husband may spend it. No cousin may claim it. It is yours." She sat very still. She did not touch the paper. Outside the window she could hear a bird singing. "Why," she said at last, "did you not simply tell me at Mrs. Pell's?" "Because," he said, "I did not know then whether you would take it or throw it in the fire. I needed to know what kind of woman you were first, and now you know." Now I know, he said, that you would have carried me to safety if I had been a beggar in rags, and that you would have gone to Mrs. Pell's cottage in the rain even if there had been no one waiting for you. I know that you did not ask me my name for a full hour after you pulled me from the earth. I know that when Mrs. Pell asked you to stay the night, you tried to refuse because you did not want to be a burden on an old woman who has little. I know enough. She looked down at her hands. Her nails were still torn from the digging. She had scrubbed them clean, but they were not the hands of a lady. I do not know how to accept this, she said quietly. You have only to say yes, he said. The papers are drawn. The land is yours. She was silent for a long time. Then she said, May I think about it? He looked surprised. He had not expected this answer. She saw him not know, for a moment, what to say. It made her like him better. A man who was never surprised was not to be trusted. Of course, he said, take as much time as you need. In the meantime, may I show you the house, since you are here? Yes, she said. That I can accept. He rose. She rose. They left the library and walked together through room after room. He did not perform for her. He did not point at things and name them and expect her to be impressed. He simply walked, and now and then he told her a small thing, that this window had once had a broken pane, that his mother had died in the yellow room upstairs when he was 8, that the long gallery had been used as a schoolroom for him and his cousin when they were boys. He was not cold. He was not warm. He was just a man showing his house to a stranger who might or might not become part of its story. They came out into the gardens. It was a fine day now, and the wet earth of the storm had dried, and the roses were opening in the walled garden. He walked her along the gravel path. He asked her about the village, about the children she taught, about Mrs. Pell. He listened when she spoke. He did not interrupt. 2 gardeners were working at the far end of the walled garden. One of them was very old. He was tying up a rose that had been broken by the storm. His hands shook, but he was doing careful work. The Duke stopped for a moment and watched him. Then he walked over. Marin followed at a distance. Fenton, the Duke said quietly. The old gardener looked up. Your Grace, your daughter, the Duke said. The one in Marston. Is she well? The gardener's face changed. She is not, Your Grace. She is very poorly. The doctor there says he has done what he can. I have written, the Duke said. I have asked Dr. Ellis in London to travel to Marston. He should be there by Friday. He is the best there is. He has agreed to see her, and any bill she has will come to me. I have told her husband, do not thank me, please, I have taken too much of your time. Get on with the roses. The gardener could not speak. He nodded twice, quickly, and turned his face away, and went back to tying up the rose. The Duke walked on. He did not look back. Marin stood where she was for a moment. Then, she walked to catch up. She said nothing about what she had heard. He said nothing either. He did not seem to remember that she had been within earshot at all. But she remembered. She thought about it for the whole rest of the walk. She thought about it in the carriage on the way home. Old Fenton, she learned later that week, had been a gardener at Ravensmoor Hall for 51 years. His daughter had married a shopkeeper in Marston, 4 days' ride away. She was 32 years old, and she had 2 little boys, and she was dying of a lung fever. Everyone in the district knew about her, because everyone in the district knew Fenton. But no one in the district had known until Mrs. Pell was told by Mrs. Pell's niece, who was in service in the Duke's kitchens, that the Duke had sent for a great doctor from London on his own money. He had not told Fenton until it was already done. He had not told anyone else at all. He had not put his name on any document that would be seen. He had done it quietly, so that Fenton could keep his pride. Marin heard about it from Mrs. Pell 3 days later on her weekly visit. Mrs. Pell told her while spooning stewed apples into a small brown bowl. She did not say it as gossip. She said it as a woman who was old enough to notice the difference between a good man and a man who wished to be thought good. Marin said nothing. She looked at the fire. "He asked me to come to his house," she said at last. "I know," said Mrs. Pell. "He gave me a paper. Land, money, something my grandmother should have had." "Did you take it?" I said I would think. Mrs. Pell nodded slowly. "That was right." "Was it?" "A gift given too easily," said the old woman, "is a gift kept too easily. You are a girl who has never been given anything. You must think before you learn to take." Marin went home that evening in the last of the sun. She walked past the crossroads. She looked up the north road for a long time. Then she walked on. 2 weeks passed. The Duke did not press her. He did not send another letter. Once, riding through the district on a matter of business, he passed the village. He did not stop. She saw him from her window. He was on the same dark horse. He did not look at her cottage. He rode on. She thought about the paper on the little table in the library with its careful lines of ink. She thought about the 20 acres of land. She thought about the small farmhouse. She thought about never being cold again. She thought about her mother, who had died at 41, worn thin by too many winters and too much worry. She thought about her father, who had scraped by teaching the village children for pennies. She thought about her grandmother Hetty, whom she had barely known, who had died when Marin was 5, and who had, on that last day, murmured about a house of ravens. On the 16th day, she wrote to him. She wrote that she would accept the land. She would not accept the money. She sent the letter with the carter, who was going that way. The next morning, the Duke's carriage came again down the village lane. He was inside it. He stepped down. He did not go to her door. He stood by the gate. He waited. Half the village was watching, of course, but he did not seem to notice. She came out to him. She left her door open behind her. "You will not take the money," he said. He said it gently, not as a challenge. "No," she said. "May I ask why?" She thought about how to answer. "Because," she said, "if I take the money, I do not have to work, and if I do not work, I do not know who I am. I have been a woman who works since I was 10 years old. I do not know how to be another kind of woman. The land I can work. That is enough." He looked at her for a long time. In the sun, his gray eyes looked almost silver. Something moved in his face that was not quite a smile. "Very well," he said. "The land is yours. The money will stay in trust. If there ever comes a day when you need it, for a doctor, for a child of yours, for a bad winter, it will be there. If that day never comes, it will not have hurt anyone by waiting." "That is fair," she said. "May I walk to the land with you?" he said. "I would like to show it to you before you take possession. There is a matter or two you should know about. Now, if you have the time." She had the time. They walked. It was a 2-mile walk, along a lane she had never taken, through a copse of oak trees, and out into a small dell where a stone farmhouse stood with its back to a low hill. The house had a thatched roof, freshly patched. 2 fields lay behind it, and a small orchard, and a well with a stone lip. Someone had swept the yard, someone had cleaned the windows, someone had lit a small fire in the kitchen chimney so that a thin ribbon of smoke rose into the summer sky. She stopped at the gate. "You have been in here," she said. "I had it made ready," he said. "In case you said yes." "How did you know I would say yes?" "I did not know," he said. "I only knew that if you did, I did not want you to see a cold, empty house. I wanted you to see a home." She could not speak. She pushed the gate open and walked into the yard. The chickens that had been shut in the coop clucked at her softly. There was a chair by the door, an old wooden chair with a cushion that had been mended twice. There were pots of herbs on the sill. She turned back to him. How long have you been having this made ready? Since the day after you visited the hall. You had it made ready before I said yes. I had it made ready, he said, so that you could say yes. She went inside. The kitchen was small but clean. There was a table and 2 chairs and a dresser with 2 blue plates on it. There was a shelf of books above the fireplace, not many, but well chosen. A copy of her father's primer, which she had not owned because her father's copy had been given away years ago. A book of poems. A herbal. A book about the keeping of bees. She stood in the middle of the room and pressed the back of her hand to her mouth. I will pay you, she said finally, for what you have put into the house. Slowly, over time. I will not accept it as a gift. Miss Ashfield, he said, the house was already here. The roof needed patching regardless. The chimney had a jackdaw's nest in it that had to come out. The plates were my great-aunt's, and they have been in a cupboard for 40 years. The books were mine. I have too many. You are not accepting a gift. You are relieving me of a burden. She almost laughed. Almost she turned her face away so he would not see. Sir, she said, I do not know how to talk to you. Then do not, he said. There is no requirement that we talk. Would you like to see the fields? They saw the fields. He showed her where the drainage ditch had been mended, and where a new stone wall had been laid, and where the old apple trees would need pruning next winter. He knew a great deal about land. He said his father had taught him. He said his father had believed that a man who owned land and did not understand it was not a man, but only a name. She listened. She asked questions. He answered them plainly, without condescension. He never once implied that she should already know these things, or that a woman was an unlikely student. He simply explained, as if he were speaking to any tenant on his estate. At the top of the second field, they stopped. The wind moved through the long grass. In the distance, they could see the roof of her old cottage in the village. This is yours now, he said. The papers will be delivered tomorrow. You are the sole owner. You may live here, or lease it, or sell it. It is entirely as you wish. Thank you, she said. It was not enough. It was all she had. He looked at her. He looked at her for what she would later think of as the moment when everything might have been said and was not. His mouth opened. Something passed across his face. Then he closed his mouth and gave her a small, correct bow. I will send the papers tomorrow, he said. Good day, Miss Ashfield. He walked back down the field toward the lane. She watched him until he was out of sight, and then she walked around the little farmhouse 3 times, touching the stones with her hand. She moved into the farmhouse in the first week of July. The village was sad to see her go, but she promised she would come every week to teach the children, and she did. She kept her small stone cottage in the village too, for those days when she stayed late with the children or when the weather was bad. She had never owned so much in her life. The Duke did not come again for some weeks. He wrote her one letter in which he asked very courteously if the roof over the kitchen had held up in the last rain. She wrote back that it had. He wrote back to say he was glad. Neither letter said anything else. In August, the village held its summer fete. It was a small thing. A meadow, some ribbons, a few tables of pies and cordial, races for the children. Marin went, as she went every year. She wore her best dress, which was still the plain gray wool, and she helped Mrs. Vance at the pie table, and she watched the smaller children run their sack race. He came. She saw him from across the meadow. He was on foot, dressed plainly again, though not as plainly as the day she had pulled him from the mine. He nodded to the vicar, who was flustered by his presence. He shook the hand of the smith. He watched the races. Then he walked slowly in her direction. She did not move from the pie table. Miss Ashfield, he said. Your Grace. I hope you will forgive me for coming without warning. I did not want you to feel obliged to receive me. I wished only to see the village. Everyone is glad you came, she said. Everyone but you. I did not say I was not glad. He looked at her. There was something wry in his face. May I have a piece of your pie? She cut him a piece. He gave Mrs. Vance a coin that was far too large. Mrs. Vance would not take it. He put it firmly in the box for the church roof. He sat down on the bench beside the table and ate the pie with a small tin fork, and he said it was the best pie he had eaten in his life, and Mrs. Vance turned bright red and did not know where to look. Then, later, when the feet was winding down and the children were being gathered by their mothers, he asked Marin if she would walk with him back to the farmhouse. He said the light was good. He had wanted to see the fields again in this light. They walked. They did not speak much. They did not need to. She had grown, in the past month, more comfortable in his silence. She had begun to understand that silence, in him, was not coldness. It was thought. He was often thinking. He simply did not perform his thinking out loud. At the gate of the farmhouse, he stopped. Miss Ashfield, he said. Yes, I have not been honest with you in one respect. She waited. When I came looking for you, he said, I came out of duty. My cousin asked me to find you. I meant to find you, give you what my family owed you, and then go back to my life. That was all. Yes, she said. That is no longer all, he said. The wind moved in the trees behind the house. A dog barked somewhere in the village, very far away. A bee crossed the space between them and went on into the garden. Since the moment you pulled me out of the earth, he said, I have not been able to think of anything else. I have tried. I am not a young man given to weakness. I am not accustomed to being unable to command my own mind. But I cannot. I see you when I do not want to see you. I hear your voice when I am at meetings in London. I remember the moment when you spoke to me, before you knew who I was, and I remember thinking that no one in my whole life had ever spoken to me as though I were only a man. She was holding the top of the gate very tightly. Her knuckles were white. I do not, he said, come to you as a duke. I come to you as a man who is buried in the earth and pulled out by your hands and who has not been the same since. I am asking you if you would consider, one day, becoming my wife. Not for the sake of the debt, not for the land, not for the money, only for this, that I am not myself without you. And I know that is a great deal to ask, and I know that I have known you a short time, and I know that there are 100 reasons for you to say no. I will accept any answer you give me. Only I could not go another week without saying it. She could not look at him. She looked at the gate. She thought about her mother, who had been 41 when she died. She thought about her father and the long winters. She thought about her grandmother Hetty, who had once served in the House of Ravens and had left it with nothing. She thought about the moment her hand had closed around his hand under the earth and how warm his hand had been. She thought about the old gardener, Fenton, and the doctor sent for from London, and the way the Duke had walked away without looking back. She thought about the plates in the dresser, and the books on the shelf, and the well that had been swept for her before she said yes. She looked up. You must give me time, she said. His face did not fall. He nodded, gravely, as much time as you require. Not much, she said, but some. I have never been asked a question like this in my life. I do not want to answer it in a hurry. Take the year if you need it, he said. I will not need the year, she said. He smiled then. It was a small, private smile that she thought no one else had ever seen. He touched the brim of his hat, and he stepped back from the gate, and he began to walk back down the lane. He had gone 6 steps when he stopped. He turned. Miss Ashfield, he called. Yes, the doctor from London reached Marston yesterday. Fenton had word this morning. His daughter is not well yet, but she is not worse. There is hope. He did not wait for her answer. He walked on. She stood at the gate and watched him go, and she thought that she had never in her life been given a gift as clean as that piece of news tossed over his shoulder as if it were nothing, when it was everything. 2 weeks later, on a morning that smelled of cut hay, she walked to Ravensmoor Hall alone. She walked the whole way. It took her 3 hours. She was carrying nothing. The servant at the door did not know her. She said her name. His face changed. He led her, without asking, to the library. The Duke was standing at the window with his back to the door. He was reading a letter. He turned when he heard her. He did not speak. He looked at her, and he did not speak. "I have thought about it," she said. He set the letter down. "And?" She walked across the room toward him. She stopped an arm's length away. "Yes," she said. He closed his eyes. He did not throw his arms around her. He did not laugh or shout. He simply closed his eyes, as if he had been holding his breath for a long time and could at last let it out. When he opened his eyes, he took her hand, only her hand. He held it in both of his. His hands were warm, as they had been the first time she had touched them. "Marin," he said. He had never used her Christian name before. "Thank you. You do not have to thank me," she said. "I do," he said. "I know exactly what I am being given, and by whom, and I will not pretend it is anything less." They stood together for a long moment by the window. Outside, in the walled garden, old Fenton was pruning a rose bush. He did not know they were watching. He was singing very softly to himself, a tune Marin remembered from her grandmother's kitchen. They were married in the small chapel at Ravensmoor Hall on a bright morning in September. The chapel was so small that only 20 people could fit inside it. She chose the guests. She chose Mrs. Pell, who cried through the whole ceremony and was cross with herself for crying. She chose Mrs. Vance and the smith and his wife and the baby. She chose the 4 children she taught, who wore ribbons in their hair. She chose old Fenton, who stood at the back with his hat in his hand and would not sit down, even when the Duke himself asked him. She wore a plain white dress. She carried a small posy of white roses from the walled garden. When she walked down the short aisle, the Duke turned to watch her, and he had a look on his face that Mrs. Pell later said she had never seen on any man's face in her 90 years, and Mrs. Pell had seen a great many faces. The vicar spoke the words. They spoke the words after him. He held her hand and she held his, and their hands were both warm. That night, after all the guests had gone, they sat together on the wide stone step at the front of the hall, watching the sun set behind the lime trees. He had taken off his fine coat. She had taken off her white shoes and set them beside her on the step. Her feet were bare on the warm stone. "I did not tell you everything," she said quietly. He looked at her. "When I found you in the mine," she said, "I thought you were going to die. I thought I was too small to move you. I thought I would sit there in the mud and hold your hand until you were gone. I have never been so afraid in my life." "I did not know that," he said. "I did not know it either," she said, "until later. In the moment, I only knew that I could not let you go. I did not know why. I did not know your name. I did not know anything about you. I only knew I could not let you go." He put his arm around her shoulders. She leaned her head against him. His shirt smelled of clean linen and of wood smoke from the kitchen fires, and, faintly, of something warm she still could not name. "Then we are 2 of a kind," he said. "I did not know your name either. I only knew that a stranger had come down into the earth after me, and had made me warm again, and I could not go back into the world I had come from without knowing what kind of woman would do that. And now you know," she said. "Now I know," he said. The last of the sun slipped behind the lime trees. Somewhere in the walled garden a blackbird sang, and then another answered, and then the summer evening settled quietly around them. She had gone into a collapsed mine to save a stranger, and in doing so she had pulled her own life, and his, out of the dark and into the light, and neither of them, from that day forward, would ever be alone in the world again.